Good afternoon, Niner faithful. I am fired up to be here, man. We have a freaking good Friday here with some news to talk about. We got relevant conversations to be had, and I am joined by a fantastic guest today in Brad Graham of the SF Niners. Brad, how you doing on this fantastic news-filled Friday all of a sudden?
I'm fantastically happy. I mean, of course, we are 49er fans. We love covering this team.
Yes.
But I think both you and I, Rob, we love the NFL. We love everything.
Yes, we do. The NFL, just for a moment, can we all take a second to appreciate what the NFL has done to an annual news cycle? They have created a damn monster in this thing to be able to dominate the news cycle year round, and free agency now feeling a little bit more like the NBA style of free agency. It's wild.
It's absolutely wild. I mean, the fact that Deshaun Watson, the situation happened last Friday. The second we found out there's going to be no criminal charges, the entire NFL went, whoa, hit pause. Free agency, again, we've seen people stop kind of looking at teams. We saw Juju Smith immediately sign with the Chiefs right after that situation landed. So I think people were waiting, teams were waiting, trying to figure out, of course, the 49ers trying to figure out what was going to go on. My goodness, Rob, what a fantastic Friday to be a fan of the NFL.
I thought man. Matt Barrows had a great tweet that summed up sort of the other teams involved in this, where he was like, Deshaun Watson had them basically rearrange all their furniture in their apartment as he was set to move in right before deciding he was going to date somebody else. Like, it just was Atlanta. How freaking awkward is it right now between Matt Ryan, who was just the face of the franchise? I mean, a good guy, loved in the community. And now you're sort of awkwardly stuck with him as like, no, Matt, we were good with you all along. Wild,
dude. And now today they owe Matt Ryan a lot of guaranteed money. They pushed it out because they were waiting for the situation, because clearly if they landed Watson, they had to trade Ryan. So they had a little contract situation where they kicked it down to today. So now they got to figure out, are they trading Matt Ryan or are they signing him to that guaranteed portion of the contract? It is wild.
My goodness. Chevy Living 21 says something big is going to happen during this show. Everyone, I can feel it. I hope that is the case. Something big has happened. If you're unaware, I kind of teased the actual opener here, but if you are unaware, Deshaun Watson has been traded to the Cleveland freaking Browns. The Cleveland Browns have swooped back into this thing and made the trade happen for Deshaun Watson. They were listed out of it, right? We got that notification that no, it is not going to be the Browns. They're out of it. And there were negotiations going back and forth with the Atlanta Falcons. They seem to be the favorites to win this thing. And Cleveland swoops back in and wins out the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. Now, I don't want anyone to think that we're failing to acknowledge the seriousness of the charges against Deshaun Watson. Sort of, I'm compartmentalizing that in that an NFL team has decided that they're moving in this direction. I would still like to acknowledge that, yes, there are significant clouds hanging over Deshaun Watson's head. I'm pretty glad that he didn't come to San Francisco so that I don't have to awkwardly dance around that topic. I'm much more comfortable saying that with 22 counts, civil cases against him, I'd rather not touch that. But obviously the Cleveland Browns swept in and frickin' won this sweepstakes.
It's unbelievable. It really felt like, if you asked me earlier this morning, I was like, oh, he's probably going to be going to the Atlanta Falcons. It really felt like that, right? Like, it just, the hometown city, all the news and everything that we heard leading up to it, it really did feel like Deshaun was going to land there. But shout out the Browns, man. We've seen it with the Jags this free agency period. I mean, when you're not a good team, you have to overspend to get guys to get in your building. It turns out they decided to make Deshaun Watson not only the highest paid player in the history of the NFL, but by $80 million. I mean, insane.
That is wild. Absolutely wild. Cleveland swung in and got the deal done. Got a couple of super chats I'm going to get to as we continue this dialogue. Chris Royal coming in to point out, what's up, brothers? Juju to the Chiefs. Yes, that's an unfortunate development. I would have liked to have seen the Niners kick the tires on Juju Smith-Schuster. They did kick the tires on Juju Smith-Schuster. I would have liked to have seen them bring him in or another wide receiver. Sons of Johnny LeMaster saying, Brad, we're following you. For anyone else that isn't following Brad, you should be. He's got fantastic content going on his YouTube channel. He runs the SF Niners. I had a fantastic time, you and I, sort of getting to know one another at the Combine. I'm wearing the Combine sweatshirt in memorial of our hanging out there in Indianapolis. Yes, anyone who's not following Brad should be. And we had another super chat coming in. Nick Money Meyer, payday. And we ain't talking about a candy bar. No, we're talking about $230 million freaking dollars. It's unbelievable. Robert Prigmore coming in as the newest sneakerhead on the channel. Appreciate that, Robert. Got a hell of a name, too. Just a championship caliber name going on there. G.I. Jones, reunite Kyle with Matt and Julio. LOL. Why the hell not at this point? All right, so let's talk. This is a good transition into, sort of what this does to the rest of the quarterback market. And I want to start out by acknowledging that it was sort of out of the blue that the Colts came in. So how did they go from not in the race to the freaking winners? Well, it seems like compensation. So let me throw this out for you, Brad, and I want to get your response. Tom Pelissero talking about 3 first-round picks plus at least 2 other assets are involved in that trade. Schefter coming out to say, every dollar of Deshaun Watson's new 5-year, $230 million deal is guaranteed per sources, setting a new record for the highest guarantee given to an NFL player. So that's how you get yourself back into the running. Is they're in conversations with the Falcons. James Palmer pointing out the Falcons thought they were close, very close to landing Watson, and they were actually working something out. But late in the talks came even more demands, including more money and guarantees per sources. Deshaun Watson with the bag.
Hey, money talks, right? We know this league is driven by the almighty dollar. I was talking about it yesterday when talking about some other moves and things that John Lynch has said in the past. And he says, we can get up here, we can get in front of the media, we can tell you we like this player and we like that player. But at the end of the day, what do the players look at? They look at the dollars. They look at the guaranteed figure, and that tells them where they stand. You could give them all the lip service you want. It's the money that talks, and the Browns backed up multiple Brinks trucks to Deshaun Watson and his crew and said, take all the money. Just make us relevant again. Please.
Take it all. And they have completely failed to insulate themselves from anything further coming out. I mean, let's be honest. You're talking about a pattern of behavior that he's been accused of here, right? I mean, you're talking about something where there are 22 civil cases that are out there. I saw a story break that, quite honestly, I have not read the entirety of it yet, but one of the victims or alleged victims did write a story with some of the details. And you could see there could be a sort of trickle campaign of 22 news stories that come out with details. Cleveland is now pot committed to Deshaun Watson. And no matter what comes out from this point on, unless they go some sort of a legal route in attempting to void his contract with some sort of a clause that they put in there, they are paying this man $250 million.
Woo! I mean, I do see a potential maybe league suspension coming, maybe 6 to 8 games for violating code of conduct policy. Even though criminal charges weren't passed, but hey, that's the Browns' problems now.
That's right.
Hey, have fun with that.
Yes, that is the Browns' problem. Chris Royal coming in with the super chat. Eat your heart out, Christmas. You may have gingerbread men, but we have our ginger beer men right here. Hey, it's just past the great Irish holiday of St. Patrick's Day. So, you got to have a couple of orange flavored beards going on after that. I'm telling you. I am telling you. So this definitely changes the needle. Hold on. We got another super chat. Another one, Joey Lilly coming in. Rob, you rock. Love the beard. Thank you. Look for Baker to go to Seattle and Jimmy to go to Houston. Bridge quarterback, Panthers or the Colts. Let's go Niners. So let's talk about that because it is the QB carousel is moving. It is musical chairs at this point, and the Niners don't want to be the last team standing without a chair when the music stops. And so they need to have a plan in place. I want to quote Jeff Howe coming in here with a little bit about Baker's preferences because obviously he's now the next quarterback domino to get offset by this. Baker Mayfield has informed the Browns that he'd prefer to be traded to the Colts, per sources. Earlier this week, prior to Mayfield's trade request, the Browns said they'd work with him on a trade. We'll see if they'll accommodate such a move to the AFC, though. So here are the teams as I see it with quarterback needs right now. Colts, Saints, Panthers, and Seahawks. Really, the available quality quarterbacks are Baker, Jimmy, maybe Matt Ryan if he decides he's upset and breaks up, but then that would add the Falcons to the list of available teams that need a quarterback. So how do you see this ranking out as far as teams that are the best fit for Jimmy or at least most likely to make this trade happen?
I mean, Rob, you were with me at the Combine when we spent a lot of time with Nate Atkins, who is the beat reporter for the Indy Star, and everything that he said leading up until the Carson Wentz trade essentially came true. And then all the stories that came after seemed to coincide. I really feel like the Colts are the best fit for Jimmy, and I feel like the Colts know that Jimmy is the best fit for them. However, I do think there's still that gamesmanship that is going on. The Colts made a massive mistake by giving a first round and a third round for Carson Wentz just to flip him the next year. So they don't want to do that again. And they aren't frugal like that. They make very smart moves. Again, they gave up a first round pick for DeForest Buckner, and it turned out to be a home run for them. So they made a mistake with the Carson Wentz. They don't want to fall into the same trap again. Jimmy Garoppolo's coming off injury. He's just had surgery. So there are concerns. And one of the biggest knocks about Jimmy Garoppolo is his availability. And in a period where he isn't available, it makes it a little bit weary. And we know the 49ers want to get a return on Jimmy. So at least from that perspective, I do see Jimmy still being the best fit for the Colts, and I think it's the best fit for vice versa. And I think that's where I would imagine he lands, but we're going to find out.
Yeah, I mean, it could change quickly. In my estimation, the 49ers overplayed their hand just a little bit early on in these negotiations. It seemed, from all the reports that we were hearing, that there were at least tentative offers on the table for Jimmy Garoppolo, and that at the Combine, there was moderate interest from a couple of teams that felt like it could have been leveraged into a quick deal for the San Francisco 49ers, much like the Colts were able to do in getting rid of Carson Wentz pretty early on in this scenario. But now you have a circumstance where people are waiting, and the Colts know that they sort of have the upper hand in this, that the 49ers are stuck and there are very few options for them. I do recall those conversations in Indianapolis. And the thing that rings true to me over and over and over again when I think about the Colts and their decision to move on from Carson Wentz, that it wasn't so much of a talent issue. It was a leadership issue. It was a locker room issue. It was a Jim Irsay issue, right? It went all the way to the top. And now you're talking about potentially bringing in a Baker Mayfield who, if there's any criticism that is warranted of him, it is he's a questionable leader, right? I mean, there have been significant instances where you've had to question his maturity, his leadership, his locker room presence, as evidenced by the train wreck tweet that came out from one of his teammates in Duke Johnson, right? So yes, it is. It's one of those things where if I have to question the Colts' motivation and I say to myself, they're after a leader, isn't Jimmy Garoppolo head and shoulders above Baker Mayfield in that regard?
I would absolutely have to agree. Again, I don't see that being a fit. However, it would be a disservice not to pretend like they weren't interested in Baker. Again, the perception, and we know how people quantify quarterback play. It's by the actual play. Well, what kind of arm talent do you have? Like,
Right.
what do your stats look like? And we know Jimmy Garoppolo is probably middle of the pack in that regard, but you cannot discredit the intangible factors. And right now, Baker Mayfield probably has one of the worst reputations across the league. And to go from Carson Wentz for the things that we've heard and pivot to Baker, it would almost be smart of the 49ers just to call the Colts bluff. Be like, you guys aren't going to bring in Baker Mayfield. Like, there's no way. Like, and, we got a great pulse of what the Colts are looking for, right? And Baker Mayfield is just not that.
No, he really isn't. We've got a couple of super chats coming in. Folks have input on this topic. No surprise there. LA Blue 49 saying, do you think Jimmy G's plan to have surgery this late in the offseason backfired? He thought he'd be able to pick his team, but now he might not be on a roster. I don't think that's the case. I still do not see a scenario in which Jimmy G is released. I think, unfortunately for my stress levels, even if the Colts decide on Baker Mayfield, I feel like the 49ers will not blink until we get very close to training camp. I think that's the hard deadline. I think training camp, with the risk of Jimmy coming in and suffering some sort of an injury where he then remains on the roster for his final season, you can't trade him, and you have to eat the salary without getting any benefit of having a quality backup or a starter, if that's how you view him. That, to me, is the nightmare scenario. And so that's the hard line in the sand. But again, if we don't see this domino fall with the Colts right now, it could be a long waiting game, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off the first question, I don't think the late surgery plan was necessarily, and the way everything is playing out, is going against what he wanted. I kind of feel like the timing of it, waiting and then kind of seeing the market shake out, he's able to get locked into a $7.5 million injury guarantee by waiting because he couldn't pass a certain physical at a certain date. I feel like it's what they were trying to accomplish so that they could potentially get released and then pick their destination, be able to work out the parameters of their next deal a little bit more seamlessly. So it's more of a 49ers problem at this point. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is sweating at all because I think he'll land on a team. It's just where and when. And that is more of an issue of the 49ers. And you mentioned training camp. I am going to personally say I think the deadline should be OTAs, because if you bring Jimmy Garoppolo back into that locker room, into the fold, unless you're doing straight up Deshaun Watson type moves where you sit him in the corner and he's not practicing, and you make it very clear to your locker room, Jimmy's only here because we haven't moved him. But if you bring him back into the fold, you start giving him starting reps, you know what the locker room's going to do. The locker room's going to be like, that's our quarterback. What are we doing? You get him through OTAs and he starts slinging it, looking real good. They're going to be like, you better not trade this guy. Yeah. Like, it's just going to create more issues. So I would want to see Jimmy gone by OTAs just for the sake of Trey Lance.
Just for the sanity of the locker room, the team, and for me, Brad, primarily for me. Help me help you. That's what I want here. All right. Dustin the Gale coming in here. Silver lining, we don't have to deal with Deshaun Watson in the NFC. I do think it is wild to me when I look at what the AFC has done in overspending of the NFC in this free agency period, not even including this Deshaun Watson $230 million deal, which essentially becomes a part of the moves that happened in free agency. The AFC is loading up. And yes, the NFC, it'll be a little bit easier to get to the Super Bowl, but I don't know it's going to be any easier to freaking win the thing.
I mean, I'm very happy because, being in the NFC West, it feels like it's been a bit of an arms race for the better part of a decade.
Yes, it has.
So I'm liking to see, I like the transfer of assets to the AFC West. Again, we got Russell out of the NFC West. He goes to the AFC West. The Bears trade Khalil Mack. I mean, they're making moves there. We got Deshaun, in the AFC. I'm happy. I'm happy that we get to just kind of look back and be like, oh, that they know how we have felt this whole time. And now
that's right. Welcome to our freaking world all of a sudden. Waruna coming in, a sneakerhead here on the channel. If Baker or Wentz were in San Francisco, they would have been viewed as leaders as well. Jimmy viewed as a leader due to his winning record. When did Jimmy G say, my mistake? I disagree here on this, Waruna, in that one thing that really jumped out to me about from our conversations with Nate Atkins in describing the leadership of Jimmy Garoppolo and the lack of leadership from Carson Wentz was his description of defensive players shirking the opportunity to back up Carson Wentz. They would get softball questions to where all they needed to do was say, yeah, we may be struggling right now. We're not where we want to be. And I have faith in Carson Wentz. He's my guy. He's our leader. They passed on that every opportunity that they had. He said it was pretty remarkable to hear them dance around it in their questions and talk about, no, I'm on the defensive side of the ball. Whereas in San Francisco, over and over and over again, you got that message about leadership. I don't think that those guys were blowing smoke. I think that's genuine.
100% genuine. It was funny. If you guys remember Adrian Colbert, the
Yes.
49ers drafted him in the 7th round. We were over on Twitter Spaces yesterday, and he jumped into one and just allowed us to drill him with questions about Jimmy Garoppolo.
Dude.
And the main questions that we were asking were, and not just me, but other people, was why do you guys value him so highly? Why? Because again, we talk about what we see on Sundays, but we don't ever talk about what happens on Monday through Saturday in the NFL. And that is a massive portion of it. It's more than just Sundays. And so a lot of people tend to focus on what they do on the field. But what Adrian Colbert said is there is just a aura about Jimmy Garoppolo. When you talk about leader of men, that is Jimmy Garoppolo. He said when Jimmy enters a room, everyone stops, everyone listens to what he has to say. It is an intangible that people aren't gifted with. Or they are gifted with. You're not always just going to be that guy who can walk into a locker room full of alphas and demand their attention. They hang on everything you say. And he went on to say, not only is he have the aura about him, but he cares about his teammates. He checks in on his teammates. And just the way he goes about his business day in and day out, it's consistent. Players see it and they try to match his day to day and how he attacks everything. And we don't see that. We just see what we see on Sundays. So it was really cool to get that perspective from a player who is being completely candid and just talking about how Jimmy Garoppolo is the literal ultimate leader. And I would have to disagree a little bit. I don't think Baker and Wentz, if they came to San Francisco, would just be viewed as leaders. I think it's been crystal clear. You put Trey Lance into that locker room, they're just going to be like, he's not the leader. It's Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. But it is also something that it's hard to quantify and, compare and contrast all the time. So I think the leadership intangible is a big thing with Jimmy Garoppolo, but we'll see how it plays out at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is really insightful to get an actual NFL player's view on what is and isn't viewed as leadership and what they would look to as those traits and emphasizing yet again what we have heard time and time again from Jimmy's teammates, right? Mm-hmm. Saying that he does have those intangibles. And let me say this, as someone who has spent a considerable portion of their career teaching people within Fortune 500 companies about leadership and what it means to be a leader. There is a true value to quality leaders. If you have ever worked for or worked with a true leader, you know it. You just know it in your core. It's hard to describe, but it's a feeling that you get. It drives you to be a better and more productive version of yourself. Yep. It causes a certain atmosphere within whatever room you are in, whatever sphere you're working within, and it raises everybody's game. It is something that if you don't know what a good leader looks like, if you're like, nah, leadership is overrated, I would say to you, you've never met one. You've never worked for one. Because when you meet him, you work for him, it's unfreaking mistakable.
And when you've had a good leader, you also then know what a bad leader looks like. And you know the opposite side of it. And then you're like, I got to push my eggs into the basket of getting with a good leader because, you hear that saying especially like when you start to look at management circles and things like that, the fish rots from the head down. If the head isn't like legit locked in and ready to go and be that leader, it permeates through the rest of the organization.
Yes.
And you get fractures and you get dysfunction because the leader isn't leading. At the end of the day, we know how it works. People have to approve things, people have to give final say. And if there isn't just a strong vision and a strong intangible aspect to that manager, director, VP, whatever, things can go crazy below and it just becomes dysfunctional. That's why teams like the Browns, teams like Washington are in a constant state of dysfunction, because it doesn't matter how many people you cycle through, at the top is the dysfunction and it just trickles down no matter what. There's no getting away from it.
Amen to that. Trickle-down economics does not work. Trickle-down bad leadership absolutely works. That works every time. The rock starts at the top and just continues on down. I just want to say, because we're about 25 minutes into the show, hey, if you're watching right now and there's over 500 of you, consider hitting the like button if you enjoy the content. Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to Brad's channel. The link is down below in the description of the video. I am almost guaranteed that everyone watching already subscribes to Brad. But if you're that one dude who's like, I haven't yet.
Don't be that one guy, okay?
I'm just waiting. No, now's the time. Now's the time to subscribe. Yes, turn on those YouTube notifications, all the good stuff. Let's go back to another super chat here. Joey Lilly back in. Watson, gonna hate it with the Browns. He just crippled that team. What weapons will he even have? He did sell out and was like, yo, this is about the money. I am getting mine, $230 million. It is guaranteed. You're going to have to give up considerable assets. You were a team that was in contention. You give up all the assets that the Browns apparently did in 3 firsts and 2 high caliber assets from the team. Does that make the Browns in your opinion, Brad, would you say with the addition of Deshaun Watson, but the subtraction of those assets, does this make them more or less of a contender, in your opinion?
100% more of a contender, and I'll continue to extrapolate on that. They just traded for Amari Cooper. You now add Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson together. When it was Baker Mayfield and Amari Cooper, you're like, oh, maybe not.
Not a great fit.
Process of Jimmy Garoppolo with Amari Cooper, you're like, oh. If you're a fantasy player, you're not drafting Amari Cooper. Well, now you get Deshaun Watson, you get Amari Cooper. Jarvis Landry requested a trade. Does he pull back that trade request and say, hold up a second? Because Deshaun is a very liked player in players' circles. Now, we understand he's got all the crazy things going outside of it, but in players' circles, he's very respected.
Yeah.
And Deshaun could sway a guy like Jarvis Landry to be like, hey, stick around. We got some fireworks. And don't forget, Nick Chubb is a top 5 running back. And now you add a comparable, like a very solid quarterback that now adds the threat of run with his legs. I mean, and you add him to Kevin Stefanski, who's kind of, off the Shanahan tree a little bit. I mean, I don't think there's an issue. They have Njoku there. Hooper's probably going to find his way out. And they still have a good offensive line. They did let J.C. Treader go. But when you look at that offense and you plug Deshaun Watson into what it is as it stands now, I didn't even mention Peoples-Jones. He's a fantastic wide receiver. So I don't think there's an issue there at all. I think they 100% got better.
Yeah, I have to agree. Even after thinking through, man, that's a boatload of assets that they just gave up, not knowing who the core pieces are that they've traded out. Those terms may start to leak out. They may even be out at this point. I know that we're seeing a couple of things in the chat, but I agree. When you plug in Deshaun Watson, assuming there is not a considerable drop-off for him in having been out of the league for a year, which I wouldn't tend to think that there would be. It's not like you're taking a college quarterback that is transitioning to the NFL. No, he had wild success in the NFL, just took some time away. You would think he would knock off the rust pretty quick. I have to agree. I think that team is absolutely a contender with him there. Interesting one from Tom Jensen, a trusted source for me. At Rob, tweet from Cleveland. Just heard the Browns are working on trading Baker Mayfield as we speak. Indy and Seattle are offering. Winston talking with New Orleans and Indianapolis. Atlanta trying to reassure Matt Ryan. Yeah, the Matt Ryan one has got, I wish I were a fly on the wall in that conversation. Baby. No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It was just a one-time thing. It'll never happen again.
I love you. I love you. No. I wasn't really interested. Yeah, it just sort of happened. Ooh. I was drinking and things got out of hand, but we love you, Matt Ryan. Yeah. That's going to be an awkward conversation for sure.
It's going to be extremely awkward conversation, but what other options do they have? But at this point, what an aspect that we have to think about is, again, what does Matt Ryan feel? ATL trying to reassure Ryan. He could have just been like, that's it. That you guys told me everything that I needed to know.
Right.
You were going to give Deshaun the keys to the city. You had all of ATL completely rally around Deshaun.
Right.
I'm Matt Ryan. Thanks for everything. I'm getting out of here. You got no weapons around me anyways. You got what are my running backs looking like? What are my wide receivers looking like? What's my O-line look like? Who's my tight end? Kyle Pitts. Got one good tight end. But other than that, I'm out of here. Peace.
Yeah, I mean, I hope they reconcile with Matt Ryan because I don't want another freaking quarterback domino to cut in the line in front of Jimmy Garoppolo. But I have to imagine that it is incredibly awkward right now. I want to celebrate Jimmy G, not Jimmy G, Jimmy J. Jimmy G still with the Niners. Jimmy J is now the newest sneakerhead on the channel here. But let's talk a little bit before we transition, because eventually we'll get to a couple more topics before we close this show out, even though this is by far the most fascinating topic to be on. Do you see, if the Seahawks are mentioned in connection to Baker Mayfield, and that would strike me as a reasonable spot for him to land, would you say it's fair to take the Seahawks off the list for Jimmy Garoppolo? That when we're talking about the teams with quarterback needs, it's at least highly unlikely that Jimmy would end up in a trade going to Seattle.
Yeah, the situation where Jimmy Garoppolo lands in Seattle, the only way that I would see that occur is if he was released.
Right.
I do not see them trading in division, especially to Seattle. I forget who was talking about it. I think it was a 49er player. I apologize. I forget exactly who it was, and it was recent, and someone asked him about that. And basically what he said is like, that would be interpreted as disrespect to Jimmy Garoppolo because you typically don't trade within division. And if you did, then you're essentially saying to not only Jimmy, but everyone in the locker room that we don't think this guy can beat us. Like, we are not afraid of sending him to take him. He's not going to do anything against us. So, I think it would just create more issues. And again, knowing Seattle, they would get Jimmy, they would reclaimate his career, and they would somehow sweep us. Like, it's just how it would work. So I don't want to send him
pass
to Seattle.
On that.
Get him out. Just put him in the AFC. I don't care. But I do think that issue, as I've heard it discussed before, teams typically don't like to trade in division, so I don't think they would trade the quarterback either. But from Evan Massey, I am seeing that the Seahawks are making a push to trade for Browns Baker Mayfield, which the guy had mentioned in the super chat. I apologize, I forget his name.
No, quite all right.
But
that was Tom Jensen.
I would much rather have Baker Mayfield up in Seattle and get Bosa and Baker going at it two times a year.
Oh, that would be epic because that would leave open the most likely spots for Jimmy G. Again, not Jimmy J, who just came back in to drop a little super sticker, a little donation there. Jimmy J, I appreciate you. Jimmy G, I appreciate Jimmy G too. But at this point, I do definitely want him gone for my own personal sanity. All right, let me bring in this next super chat. There's so much going on in the chat. You guys are fired up. Again, hit the like button if you're here because you are active in the chat. Cap Speaking coming in. You guys are a great duo. I agree, Cap Speaking. Keep up the good work. But Rob, do you have a Rice jersey? Cap Speaking, not only do I have a Rice jersey, it is the first jersey that I owned in my life. My brother, Bill Schuh, gave it to me Christmas of 1998, and I still rock the same Rice jersey to every game, and I keep it in pristine condition. Yes, it has had some brown mustard spilled on it from Candlestick Park, but that just makes it all the more original to have a little bit of Polish sausage from Candlestick Park still lingering in the fibers somewhere.
I love this question because this is a little bit of it's an inside joke on our channel. And I
thought that might be the case.
I love that you have a Rice jersey because I'll have jerseys. I'll prop them up on the TV sometimes to give a little insight. I had the Trent Williams up. We had a viewer come into one of our live streams and called me absurd for having a Trent Williams jersey up and not a Jerry Rice jersey.
What?
And it turned into a crazy thing where I just started rifling through all my jerseys. Not one Jerry Rice. I got Mike Iupati. I got Patrick Willis, Trent Williams, George Kittle. I got Bosa. I had a Maurice Jones-Drew jersey, and that was right before we went to the Combine and talked with Maurice. So it was just a huge inside joke. And so now we talk about it all the time. They're like, you don't even have a Rice jersey. Like, how can you even be a 49er fan? Because that's the whole point of this guy was saying. He was like, how do you have a Trent Williams jersey and not a Jerry Rice jersey? You're not even a real fan. What are we talking about? I'm like, okay, no worry about my signed Jerry Rice picture right here. Who cares about that?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a Jerry Rice jersey. He's like,
and no worry about the fact that anyone who's willing to go get a Trent Williams jersey, a lineman's jersey, is most definitely a 49ers fan. Like, the fair weather people are the ones who just get the Jerry jersey, right? It's when you commit further than that you're truly, truly faithful. I love it. Exactly. Luke Luna coming in. Brad, my dude. Schuh, my boy. If you haven't liked it, I don't know what to tell you, Luke says. So yes, if you haven't hit the like button, do so because you support these two fine young gentlemen that are talking about everything that's going on in the league right now. And that just happens to be obsessed with the Watson trade. Let's go through the rest of the teams that are potential landing spots for Baker or for Jimmy G at this point. We sort of ruled out Seattle for Jimmy unless it comes after having cut him. It appears that Seattle is in the running for Baker Mayfield. The Panthers, do you see them with how much money they have committed to Sam Darnold at this point? Do you see them as a legitimate contender for really either candidate in Baker or Jimmy, but specifically with Jimmy's salary?
That's a tough one because when I look at the Panthers, they just look like such a complete dumpster fire in that regard. It feels like they made a desperate move to get Sam Darnold. It did not work out. Midseason, they bring back Cam Newton, the former franchise #1 quarterback that the fan base loved. That didn't work out, which almost signaled like Sam Darnold wasn't the guy mid-year.
Right.
And Sam Darnold already has confidence issues. They did not do a good job of building him up or at least supporting him through his early struggles. They really just kicked the can down the curb. So now they're just kind of stuck sitting with not only the compensation that they gave up to give Sam Darnold, but now they're paying him. And what's next? They're clearly not sold on it. They're at all. So it's definitely a business decision. Do I see Jimmy Garoppolo potentially landing there? I do. And my dream scenario, give me Brian Burns. Somehow, I don't care how. We'll send Jimmy plus more. Give me Brian Burns on the squad. My son, I need him back in my life. But same thing with Baker, man, right? Because with Baker, same issue. You're going from a top let's see. Baker was first. Sam Darnold was third or fourth in the same draft class.
Right.
And the whole debate leading up to it was, it's either Sam Darnold or Baker.
Right. Neck and neck.
Both of them busted out. And guys like Lamar Jackson and, the quarterback up there in Buffalo just balled out. Josh Rosen, he went down in flames. But so that's just a situation where I feel like if the Panthers go after either one of those two, they're just headed for more issues.
I agree, but I do like you bring up a fantastic point in that I believe the 49ers overplayed their hand. I think there was a point in time where they probably could have gotten a second for Jimmy, and they tried to get a little bit more. That backfired on them. I don't think they're going to get more than they were originally offered. So I think it is fair to say that they have overplayed their hand in that respect.
Yeah.
And they now could get creative, as you suggest. They could begin to target players within a team. And in doing so, they can save significant face. John Lynch can save significant face by packaging Jimmy, potentially another player, or a draft pick and bringing back someone of value. To me, the Burns deal would be a phenomenal way to go about that. It allows you to get the deal done, move the money off the books, bring back a stud. And like I said, the most important thing I think at this point for John Lynch is saving face, making it look like he won the deal, even if it's just moderately so.
Absolutely. If you give me Brian Burns, and again, that's Jimmy plus picks probably.
Right.
Like you would have to send Jimmy plus additional assets. I came up with a crazy trade like Jimmy, I think it was like a third, a fifth, a sixth, and a conditional fourth that could become a third. Give me Brian Burns and a fourth in 2022. Get the deal done. Let's do it. It would take something like that.
Yes.
But that is just my me trying to speak it into the universe. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would literally do a lot of crazy things to get Brian Burns on this roster, including throwing a crazy trade at the Panthers, including Jimmy Garoppolo.
I would be on board with that. That would be a phenomenal return. By the way, speaking of returns here, that story earlier netted you a return here. Waruna coming in. This is for Buy Rice jersey fun. Rob, make sure to send this across to Brad. He's going to be watching. He's going to want to see the Venmo receipt of me sending you $5.
I'm going to need that $5, Rob.
I'm going to need that cheddar real soon.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh,
So
I don't know if this is true, but I was going to bring it up. I'm going to try and confirm it as true as well. But Raphael 5629ers, one of the sneakerheads here on the channel, saying Winston signing with the Saints. But that's my question. We're not reporting that here. I've not confirmed it myself. If we do confirm it, we will report it. But
Right.
Let's say it's a hypothetical. Let's just talk about the Saints right now because they are one of the four teams out there that we mentioned. The Colts, the Saints, the Panthers, the Seahawks. We've covered the Seahawks. We've covered the Panthers. When you look at the Saints, do you see, whether it has happened now or will happen in a few minutes, do you see Winston as the target there for New Orleans? Is that their plan B?
Yeah, so per Pro Football Talk, just came across notification. Jameis Winston is back in play, in quotes, for the Saints. So I don't think he's signed yet, but they could potentially be working towards that. And it would make sense. Jameis has been there for 2 years already. Unfortunately, had the severe knee injury that ended his season and kind of put New Orleans into a tailspin. And
Right.
I think when Jason Aponte and I were talking on Wednesday, he made a really good point. If Jameis Winston doesn't get hurt, there's a good chance the 49ers don't make the playoffs, because if New Orleans had won instead of losing that last game, I think it was against the Dolphins when we were all rooting for the Dolphins,
Right.
or something like that. If we would have ended in a tie, it would have been the Saints that got in. We would have got bounced. The 49ers aren't making the NFC Championship because they never would have made it to the playoffs. And with Jameis Winston, he gets you at least one more win.
Most definitely.
So it's as long as they trust the person.
Yeah.
And the medical checks out, it makes a ton of sense. Now, is it going to be the move that pushes them over the mountaintop? Probably not. But they have a decent enough roster, and if you can get efficient enough play out of Jameis Winston, then it makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine you get him for cheap too, and you're not.
That's the thing that appeals to me. Yeah, the cheap factor, because when you're going with Jimmy, there's question marks there too, right? We act like, hey, Jimmy's a solid quarterback option, but he's a solid quarterback option that comes with a lot of question marks. And that's what these teams are debating when they look at the salary, the assets they have to give up, and then bringing him in and getting a new deal done. How long do you want to commit to Jimmy Garoppolo? You're not going to give him a 5-year fully guaranteed deal, right? That's not happening. So the Jameis Winston piece offers the alternative of less commitment, less financial commitment, and easier to move on from. If you get to a point where you decide that that wasn't the correct path, you now have an easier time saying, we made a mistake, we're going this direction. If you do that with Jimmy Garoppolo, it becomes pretty significant egg on your face as an organization because you gave up assets and you paid him a pretty penny as well.
Absolutely, and it's hard to lead from the sideline. Like,
right.
The best ability is availability in this league. And although we talk I specifically talk very highly about Jimmy Garoppolo as a leader. You can't lead from the sideline in a walking boot or because your arm's in a sling because you've just had surgery, and that is the constant with Jimmy. And as we sit right now, he's recovering from a shoulder surgery. So. Right. It's like clockwork. It feels like Jimmy Garoppolo's going to get hurt. He got hurt with the Patriots. He got hurt with the 49ers. It just feels like that is going to be something that, teams are going to be wary of. And he already has a very high price tag that comes along with it. And you're going to have to trade assets to get him. That's the biggest thing that I think is playing against the 49ers right now.
It is. There are things that are weighing down the ability to get this deal done. Jessica Gilmore, I just like it. Crab legs staying in the bayou. Bayou. Yes, indeed. Bradley coming in. Should the 49ers try to get Kerry Hyder back since Seattle just released him? I'd hope so for a cheap deal. I had this added to the list of topics. I do not think we're going to get to very many, if any, of those. But I did add that as Kerry Hyder, having been released right before we started this live. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it was buried by the news of Deshaun Watson. But it is a relevant freaking storyline for the San Francisco 49ers. And it is something that I would think they should consider with the need on the interior of the defensive line. To me, it feels like getting Kerry Hyder back, attempting to recreate some of that 2020 production. He didn't have success in Seattle in 2021, so you would think you could get him back on a reasonable deal. Is he somebody you would have an eye on as free agency rolls on?
I think for me to be interested to get Kerry Hyder back, it would have to be a situation like kind of on a deal that he signed when he first showed up with the 49ers, right, or kind of something like the Arden Key deal, maybe a little bit more just for good faith. But honestly, I always appreciated Kerry Hyder and what he did in 2020. But I was not upset at all for him to see him head up north. I didn't lose 1 ounce of sleep. And as we continue to see, the impact was very minimal up there in Seattle. So again, if you want him as a depth piece, a rotational guy, you get him on one of those. Again, we need bodies. We've seen how Chris Gorsuch runs his defensive line rotation. He throws bodies at you. So if he's going to be one of those guys, then yeah, I can deal with that. But also, too, I'm still looking for the 49ers to either trade up or see who falls in regards to edge and really hit home on someone who can be an impact across from Nick Bosa.
Do you see, I know this is sort of off track and it fits into some later topics, but we'll revisit it. Do you see any remaining free agents at edge that you think could fill that slot? Because I agree that that's one of the needs remaining. I also see some other holes that leave me wondering if we only go into the draft with 1 second-round pick, can we truly fill all the holes that we need to? Because I could see a scenario where the Niners need to trade up a little bit to get one of those edge rushers, or if a Jalen Petrie or another safety that they covet fell into the 50s, they may want to jump up a little bit and pounce on that. Do you see a Dante Fowler or any of the remaining free agents at the edge as a suitable fill-in? Maybe not the same excitement you'd have for drafting someone like a Nick Bonito or a Boye Mafe if they were to trade up. But do you see an option for the Niners to go a different path that frees them up in the draft?
So it's funny that we're talking about Kerry Hyder because Seattle also released Carlos Dunlap. And in my study last year of watching, I'm big on the offensive line, so I pay a lot of attention to them. Yes, so I'm paying a lot of attention to the defensive linemen. Carlos Dunlap was giving us some fits, and I still saw the ability to rush off the edge, probably Probably he's a situational pass rusher in his career. But again, if you're not going to keep Arden Key maybe hits the open market, signs elsewhere. Again, wanting a piece to be a rotational guy who's not going to come in and break the bank or be a every down player. I actually like Carlos Dunlap much better than Kerry Hyder. So, and I think you could get him back on that cheap deal. So I would like to see that. You get me Carlos Dunlap, and you go out into the draft because, as you know, you and I were at the combine.
Yes.
This draft is littered with edge talent at
yes,
each
it is.
tier. So you're going to be able to find guys up and down the draft. It's just where specifically do you want to take them? So if you can supplement with a guy like Carlos Dunlap on a cheap deal, who's going to be in that rotation, can play that Arden Key role if they opt not to bring back Arden Key because he's still out there. They technically could bring him back. That's kind of how I'd like to see it play. Again, I want the 49ers to get a cost-controlled edge defender once we figure out what's going on with D Ford and eventually move that off the books. It gets replaced with a similar caliber player, but he's on a rookie deal. And then you can eventually give him the extension he deserves if it turns out to be a prominent player for the 49ers.
I love that. I still love that strategy. I loved it even more when it looked like this was going to be a strong free agent class of safeties, and that might drive down their prices. Safeties got pretty well paid, and unfortunately, the Niners haven't gotten anybody that seems to be a suitable replacement for Jaquiski Tartt. Tartt is still out there, but I kind of have my feelings about him not coming back. But I would have felt better about going that direction if the Niners had been able to take advantage of that robust safety market. And who knows, maybe they still will. There's still some big names out there. It still could happen, but I like the idea of having that inexpensive bookend rusher. Love that. Bringing in another super chat from Leo here. No wonder Brady unretired. Look at the NFC. It's wide open. That's a fact. The man is smiling from ear to ear. Bullpup 33, one of the sneakerheads here on the channel. Get the man a number 80. We've got requests.
Hey, you can see how this catches fire, man. It's one of our favorite inside jokes over at our channel. I mean, anytime something comes up, or it's like, you don't even have a Rice jersey, man. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm glad that I didn't fall victim to that because I just by default have one hanging up in the closet.
You had a fantastic answer. You even brought the like mustard from the Polish dog at Candlestick. I mean,
right? Like legit fandom. We're not talking about a lightweight fan. We're talking about a heavyweight fan in Rob Schuh. He is committed like a nut, like a freaking nut job. I deserve to be 5150'd for the amount of passion I have for the San Francisco 49ers. I've seen it in person
too. He is not lying. This man loves this team. He loves football, man. It's a blast.
Yeah, when I smile ear to ear on these broadcasts, that is genuine. That is how I feel about this sport and how I feel about this team. Cap speaking, coming in. Rob going in on his dope classic Rice jersey made it so much better. But Brad, you're the man. Great show, guys. The people are loving it. I'm telling you, man. They like this pairing. They like Rob and Brad. We got almost 1,000 folks watching it right now. If you haven't hit the like button, please do. Amplify that signal. And if you haven't subscribed and you like the content, please do. If you don't know Brad, which I think is just malarkey, if you're saying it, his information is down below in the description of the video as well. You need to be subscribed to that content. I appreciate all of the interaction here. All right, let's knock off the last team that we're talking about here and then transition a little bit in topic. So it would seem that after we've gone through Seahawks, Panthers, Saints, and Colts, that it does leave the Colts as the most obvious landing spot. And I know that we talked about what we gained from the combine there. But if you think about what the Colts are looking for, them playing a little bit of hardball, you indicated this, and I agree with it, because they now realize, like, hey, we may be the last suitor that you have. Like, we may be your last option. We are the ex-girlfriend that knows you just got dumped by somebody that's coming crawling back to us. So do the Colts play hardball here? In your gut, Brad, how long does it take for the Jimmy freaking Garoppolo domino to fall?
God. I feel like it could go up to the draft even.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like it could be some time. I think we'll have more clarity once some of the other dominoes fall. Maybe Baker goes and gets traded to Seattle, and that would help speed up the process. But if Baker takes a long time, if it comes out that Matt Ryan he's requesting a trade,
Oh no.
done, then he becomes that next piece that holds the market. Um, I see a range of outcome where just based on waiting for these pieces to fall, they could play chicken all the way up until the draft, because who knows? What if the Colts call the bluff again and say, screw it, we're trading up into the draft. We're going to grab Kenny Pickett and we're going to shove him in there and we're going to ride with it, see what happens.
That's a nightmare scenario. If we had Matt Ryan say, I'm done with this. You flirted with Deshaun Watson. You now got to lay in this bed that you made. And he requests a trade. He would immediately leapfrog both Jimmy and Baker as the next most valuable quarterback. Wouldn't you think? Or if you were 100%. Choosing between the two, would you still choose Baker over Matt Ryan?
No, Matt Ryan in a landslide. I think the only thing that you're really concerned about is the potential contract that comes along with Matt Ryan. I mean,
the albatross.
You saw the numbers leading up to it. Yeah, the highest, I think it was like a $40 million cap hit or something
crazy.
Absurd. So, although he is he would be instantly far and away the best quarterback available. What's the money look like? Not everyone's got that Browns money where they can just
no. They do not
throw it all at Deshaun. So that's going to be the next thing, because we've seen teams just pay other teams to take a contract off the books. I think we saw the Browns, I think, took Brock Osweiler, I think, off the Texans' hands just to clear the contract, and they got picks out of it just to take on the money. So you need that suitor, and that is a team like the Browns or the Jags, but they got quarterbacks now. So who does that leave open? It becomes, I think, a little bit more muddy with Matt Ryan, but I think that bridge might be burnt.
I think so too. I would feel betrayed.
Yeah, by the city, by the fan base, by every single person in the organization, because I guarantee you they showed their true colors. You know, they showed that they're not loyal to that man, and he's got the money, man. He's already handsomely paid.
Yes, he's been well compensated.
He can get money from somewhere else, and he can go be successful somewhere else. Again, they're in a rebuilding stage anyways, so it might be just time to move on to the next.
Well, let's hope that the Niners can get a deal done before Matt Ryan makes up his mind and inserts himself into this frickin' carousel of quarterbacks. I just like Jim Trotter's tweet that he just put out here. Since we're talking about money, we're talking about the money involved with Matt Ryan. It just feels relevant, and I love it. Whenever you hear it's not about the money, just know money is always a factor. Not judging, just saying. Yes, when you are dealing with life-changing, generational, make your family set for life money, it is absolutely about the money. And Deshaun Watson proved it.
So this just came across. I don't know how accurate it is, but it does sound like tight end Austin Hooper is signing a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Tennessee Titans.
Oh, interesting. I thought I had seen a link of him to the Chiefs, but nothing had been official. I wonder if that was another scenario where at the last minute there was a little bit of a flip-flop. That seems to be happening quite a bit this year, at least significantly more than it has in years past.
Right.
That'll be an interesting fit. Grant and I were just talking on his channel about the Niners' need for a tight end too, and Austin Hooper seemed like a solid fit there. I now have my eyes set on Jelani Woods. I just fell in love with him at the combine, and I feel like he would be a dope tight end too, and has the potential to grow, right? I mean, could eventually be the type of athletic freak that, God forbid, if something, did derail George Kittle's career, that 3 years from now, Jelani Woods could be a stud. I mean, it could also be a bust that continues his 7.5% drop rate. But if not, then, could be a steal.
Absolutely. And, with people that I've talked to that are in the know, it doesn't sound like Dwelly is going to be that third option. So they need another guy.
They
And they
do.
feel confident about Charlie Warner and his development. But I also think Charlie Warner slots out better as the tight end 3. And we know the 49ers are going to carry 3 tight ends based on how often they use them in the blocking game and on special teams. So I imagine they're still in the market. I was really liking the idea of Bob Tonyan from Green Bay.
Yes. He was the other name on the list along with Hooper.
He works out with Kittle every year. And so I've been pushing on them like, hey, any chance that's going to happen? And the latest word that I got today is most likely not. It's probably not going to happen based on just, money issues and things like that. So my dream was skyrocketing for a second because it did sound like it could be a viable thing. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's like, don't count on it. I was like, damn it.
It's out. It's out. That's terrible.
Because that would have been a fire duo. I mean, you get Tonyan and Kittle, and they're already like best friends. Like
2 dogs, right? Yeah. The dog mentality in both of them. I just love that about them. Working man mentalities. Yep. Luke Luna coming in, sneakerhead of the channel. We have the stars. Calm down, people. We are adding bricks to an already solid foundation. Other teams need a star. We don't. I'm happy with the additions. I believe wholeheartedly. Well, I agree wholeheartedly with Luke. I also, from someone who does like to have the occasional splash signing and feel like we are pushing some chips into the middle of the table, I have found myself sort of in the middle. I'm very pleased with the additions that have happened, and that's going to be a topic that we transition to quickly. But I would say that there's also a piece of me that feels the 49ers have pursued somewhat of a cautious strategy going forward, that they're not pushing all their chips into the middle, and they're waiting a bit to see what they truly have, to confirm what they have in Trey Lance before really making some big moves. I could be swayed differently if they make some additions throughout the rest of free agency, but right now it sort of feels that way. They're adding peripheral pieces, some very important pieces. They're shoring up special teams, but they're not taking a swing for the fences in my book.
I would agree. I feel like I like the strategy, to be honest, based on what we can do. We all, I think, are in the same boat. That 25, around approximately $25 million cap hit that Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of sitting on is really kind of forcing our hand in a lot of regard. Now, clearly, we've seen the 49ers make the moves that they needed to make to be cap compliant by the start of the new league year. They freed up $18 million, like that, it felt like. Got Charvarius Ward signed. I like that move. I think that will be an impact. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to come in and start opposite of Emmanuel Mosley, and I like the way he matches up with these bigger bodied wide receivers in guys like Allen Robinson, who is now on the Rams. They have Cooper Kupp. You got DK Metcalf up north. You have DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona. So you have a similar archetype of wide receiver 1 in the NFC West. So it suits you to have a big physical type cornerback to come in and match up with those guys. And what I like about Ward is a press man guy, and that we haven't had a lot of that. So that's what's really cool about it is I think Mosley has been great in zone coverage and really shown he can be extremely effective in coverage. But I like the mentality that, hey, Ward, you need to go guard Cooper Kupp, and you're just going to follow him wherever he goes. And we need you to lock him up and clamp him at the line of scrimmage. We'll give you help over the top, but we need to make it so that he doesn't get free release. And that goes back to the pass rush, allows the pass rush to get there. If they can add solid pass rush, they add Ward. We'll see what Odin turns into. Again, they signed the safety who will be, he was an all-pro as a special team gunner.
Right, in 2020, right?
Yes, for the Colts. So that happened today. And then with McLeod, he slots out to be a nice piece for special teams, but he could have a potential role on the offense as well. So although, Ward might not have been that Stephon Gilmore, the J.C. Jackson and the name brand that everyone wanted, I still like that signing, especially the more I've gotten to do the research and the ancillary signings that they have. there's a much needed role for them because we know how much the 49ers struggled on special teams and depth. So I like those moves. Again, it's not splashy. It's not the big names because honestly, we don't have the money right now. Is at least what it feels like.
And that's the thing with Ward. Not only am I impressed with the player and the scheme fit, and I love his mentality and the way he came across in the presser. He seems to be the right type of mentality for a cornerback. You've got to have a certain element to your personality, and he seems to have that in spades. And so I'm all on board there. But I also believe it's one of those pickups. It's one of those deals. It happened at the end of day one, right? At the tail end of giving out these ludicrous contracts that are going out. And so everyone thinks, well, it's a ludicrous contract as well. We overpaid. But my contention is that you cannot truly grade that acquisition until you have seen the full structure of the contract and compared it and contrasted it against J.C. Jackson or any of the other guys that you coveted. For me, it would be against J.C. Jackson because that does feel like I was listening to Eric Crocker, and I tended to agree with his logic that you're looking at the difference between someone who's sort of viewed by most of the league, most of the fan base as a fairly locked down corner, right? You can put J.C. Jackson on anybody, and Ward, a minor tier below that, right? You still are going to get him on the best option of the opposing teams. The big bodied matchup works well specifically as a scheme fit for the 49ers. But again, I think people would have been more excited by the splash of a J.C. Jackson. But you're only looking at the outside of the contract, the first offer sheet or the first page, and you got to dig in and find out what the guaranteed money truly is, not just what it's being reported to be. And I do think you'll see a pretty marked difference between what J.C. Jackson gets and the length of that deal and then what happens within the Ward deal. It probably will give us greater flexibility, and we can use that right now.
I think you're 100% correct. I think that's extremely on point with how to look at it. And two, another thing is he is a bit of an ascending player, being 25 years old, coming right into the prime. Again, he's an undrafted free agent. He had to work for everything he's ever had. He came, like you said, he came across with great energy in that press conference. And you see the mentality on the field. But when you got to just kind of hear him talk a little bit, you're like, all right, he's about that life. He's gonna mix it up.
Yes, he
and
is.
It's nice to have some of those guys. Now, he might not be that level of J.C. Jackson now, but who's to say what he'll be in 2 years?
That's right.
Who's to say what he'll be with the defensive coordinator that we have and how we've seen him take a guy like Ambry Thomas, who was struggling immensely, and try to put him in the best position to be successful. He's going to do the same thing with Ward. And so I imagine I'm not just evaluating Ward on what he has been. I'm also evaluating him on what he will be and could be. And because I still see the arrow pointing up, 25 years old, you're entering right there at the prime of your career. Head to the moon, baby.
Take off, baby. Let's go. Rohan coming in. Ward's got that swagger. Huge value in a younger room. The younger room is a key point that Rohan brings up here in that the 49ers have flipped the script on the defensive backs room, and now it is one of the younger rooms there with Ambry Thomas, Diamador Lenore, and Emmanuel Mosley is still a young gentleman. Ward, a young gentleman. I'm thrilled by it.
You Jerome, mean no more Josh Norman, Rob? What the heck are we doing?
When are we bringing him back? Maybe at the end we'll have just enough cap space left to bring in Josh Norman to take us.
I don't want that man on my team.
Don't
even come near. Don't even think about it, Josh.
Oh, Jerome coming in to talk about putting the icing on the cake with the 49ers overall strategic philosophy in free agency topic, which I so secretly swapped in the banner as we were talking. A lot of 3-year deals, Jerome says. Send to say, let's see what we have in Trey as a starter, then go all chips in. I think he tends to say, let's see what we have in Trey as a starter. I agree. I do think that's what the 49ers are illustrating, that we have a lot of faith in Trey. We believe he's a superstar. And we just want to confirm that before we push all the chips into the center of the table. I will not be surprised if we see 49ers jump out to a hot start to the season if we saw a chips in mid-season trade type of move.
I agree with that too. And I think we kind of have to look at Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa as free agents a little bit.
That's a
Because
fair
if
point.
we want to retain them, they are both up for extension. Now, it might not happen this year. They could still push it out a little bit and be a little bit flexible. But you also have to build out those two contracts. And Nick Bosa has the potential of being the highest paid defensive end in the NFL when it's
Yep.
time to sign on the dotted line. And Deebo Samuel, we just saw how much Devontae Adams got.
Devontae's not doing us any favors, man.
No, everyone was worried about Christian Kirk. I'm like, I don't care about Christian Kirk. You guys are worried about the wrong one.
Right?
Christian Kirk isn't setting the bar. He got paid, but
Yeah,
we
he
know
did.
why he got paid. Because the Jacksonville Jags need to throw money at everyone. Do you see what they paid Zay Jones? And I love Zay Jones. He's a draft crush of mine. But so in regards to that situation, it's the bigger concern is Devontae Adams and what he got, because I guarantee you that's the contract he saw and was waiting for. And now his agent is like, let's go, baby. This is what we are going to try to get, maybe get more or get right around that zone. And that's a lot of money for the San Francisco 49ers.
Oof. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right. Well, I want to just hit a couple of topics before we go. This has been a fantastic show. If you're watching now, if you're one of the 1,000 people that are here enjoying this phenomenal content, please do hit the like button, subscribe, and go down in the description and subscribe to Brad as well, the SF Niners. But let's talk a little bit about coming into free agency. I want to get your thoughts on this. What did you see as the biggest holes on the roster headed into free agency? What were those positional needs that the 49ers had coming into it?
So it was a TBD. I had a tag on it. I said, we got to wait and see, because we had to wait and see what's going to happen to Lakin.
Yes.
We had to wait and see what's going on with Brunskill. Okay, they hit him with the first right of refusal. Any team throws a contract at Brunskill, I think Brunskill walks.
Gone.
So, and I said this, I got my tinfoil hat on. I don't know if Alex Mack will be coming back. It's not official. You go back to the press conference in which I almost said Trent Baalke. Josh Lynch was talking about, like, we have a good feeling that he's going to return.
Yeah.
It feels like
right.
It's headed in that direction. Well, I just think back to when Joe Staley retired.
Oh, no.
He didn't retire until the draft, because they had to get the replacement plan in place. Well, they sat on Weston Richburg's retirement for months. They've done this before.
They have.
Specifically to the O-line, too.
Yes.
So, again, I don't want to freak anyone out. That's not what I'm trying to do, but it is in the back of my mind that I haven't heard the definitive language.
Nope.
And the no definitive language should be a red flag for anyone. Because if they're not saying he is coming back, we still don't know. Well, we have a good feeling he's coming back. Well, I have a lot of good feelings about a lot of things. Those can go away very quickly.
I had a good feeling about Christy Brinkley when I was growing up my entire life, and that never materialized into anything.
I love it. So that's the thing. It's like, they're transitioning off Jimmy. Does a guy heading into his 14th year, who has been one of those guys in the locker room saying Jimmy's the starter, Jimmy's the guy, it's not Trey's time, does he want to play his last year with a guy that's going to be getting his first year as a starter? Like,
right. A whole new mobile quarterback that requires you to adjust as a blocker.
Mike McDaniel's gone. That means the run scheme and the run fits are going to be changing. You're getting new personnel in there. You're potentially going to have Aaron Banks at left guard. Who's at right guard? Is Mike McGlinchey okay? Is he going to be okay at the start of the year? Alex Mack could be like, might be a good time. So
might be time to step away.
So to come back to the original question, my biggest concern has been about offensive line. From the jump. So Lakin leaves. I'm like, oh gosh. Like, I thought it was going to happen. I did not think Lakin was going to return.
Yep.
I didn't think they were going to match the contract that he got in the open market.
Right.
You could sense it from his final press conference. You could sense it from Trent and the way Trent talked about. They weren't going to meet at a contractual agreement. It just wasn't going to happen. And you could sense that at the end of the year. But that leaves so many questions.
Yes, it does.
About what does this offense look like? Because when we saw Trey Lance get in, it was like Kyle forgot how to call plays or like just got away from what they were good at because Trey, and it's just like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So for me, heading in, offensive line was the biggest concern that I had a TBD tag on. I'm ripping the tag off. I am concerned about that.
Yeah.
Line.
I mean, when 60% of your offensive line is scratch that. 80% of your offensive line is unsettled because you got McGlinchey returning from injury, right? Varying levels of being unsettled, but unsettled nonetheless. That's a concern. Yes. That's a concern when you're bringing in a second-year quarterback who could use a shored-up offensive line. That's a concern. So here's the follow-up that Gizmo does a fantastic job. He takes the pressure off me as the moderator and just asks the follow-up question for me. You got to love that.
Those are the best viewers.
Oh, my God. That's phenomenal. When they're like, oh, this is what we're talking about. Yeah. Now, here's a question that tags onto that.
Perfect.
Gizmo, what's the one move the 49ers can do to improve their offensive line the most? Shanahan's offense doesn't work without a good O-line.
It does not.
No,
it does not at all.
You got one move to fix it, Brad. You got one move. What are you doing?
Okay. I said this earlier. La'el Collins. I will cut people if I have to clear up space, to give that man however much money he wants. And this is how I also look at La'el Collins, because he was just released from the Cowboys.
Right.
And I imagine he's going to get a lot of money, so that's what makes it really difficult. But if I'm in that GM suite and I'm sitting there with Jed and Kyle, I'm like, what are we doing to fix this offensive line issue and theoretically upgrade Laken, which it would be. Like, I love Laken, but La'el Collins would be a substantial upgrade if you were to take him and plug him in at left guard, and you're putting him at left guard next to Trent Williams, and you essentially get two very similar archetype players playing next to each other. Oh my goodness. I have
gracious
wild thoughts thinking about that. So if that's, but again, it's not realistic.
Right.
But if I had to, and I was getting desperate and I knew some of the chips that were falling, I'm doing anything I can to get Collins on this roster.
Let me ask this, because the Niners have not been overly aggressive on that front. Does that give you any indication that maybe, in fact, Mac would come back and McGlinchey's injury isn't lingering quite as much? Like, does the fact that they're not in on La'el Collins indicate anything to you? Or do you think they're just priced out because they still have Jimmy's contract on the books?
It feels like a priced out situation. You know, it feels like they don't have the means at the moment because of the way Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of holding them to a certain level. And again, with offensive linemen, good offensive linemen are so rare. So when they come available, Alex Kappa, they get signed immediately. Now, JC Treader, I believe, is out there. And if you can somehow, if the max situation is what it is, and you can pivot to JC Treader, well, then that's almost like a wash. And I love Alex Mack, but he is 36. He is getting older.
Right.
And if you can transition to a younger player in JC Treader who can run the zone scheme and be successful in that type of movement, gap scheme offense, then there's an option. It's just, how much does he cost?
Right.
I think he would be a lot more affordable than La'el is. But,
yes.
Me putting my big picture cap on and just, salivating at watching Trent Williams and Collins destroy the league from the left side, it makes me really excited. So again, I would try to do that, but maybe the more realistic option is landing on someone like JC Treader. Maybe he would kick into guard. We'll find out.
I would like that move as well. Charles Thurman coming in, one of the sneakerheads here on the channel, I think projecting what he wants to happen. Mayfield to the Sea Chickens, so Boss Bosa can knock the wine out of him. Love this show. Thank you, Charles. Thank you for coming on. I am hoping for that just because as we went through those teams available that need a quarterback, when we're talking about the Saints, the Colts, the Panthers, the Seahawks. The Seahawks seem like the one team the Niners would not trade Jimmy to. And so that feels like an ideal fit. If you can fill that seat with Baker, now it leaves the other three available to compete over Jimmy Garoppolo. So that would be a win to me. All right, let's transition in the topic here to the biggest regrets. We talked about what the biggest holes were of the guys that have walked so far. Who was your biggest regret in free agency that the Niners did not match that deal or, get it done earlier or overpay even?
I'm not terribly concerned about DJ Jones or Laken Tomlinson, although I hold them in the highest regard.
I do too. I got to put up the DJ Jones for that.
There you go.
Yes.
They got the money that they were rightfully deserved.
They deserved it.
DJ Jones was a 6th-round draft pick. Last year, tested the open market. No one was interested. Comes back, balls out, earns, $20 million guaranteed from Denver? Get your money, man. Like, I do not fault you at all.
Amen to that.
I don't look at that as a situation where I regret it because I felt it coming and I was okay with it happening. Because I think you can identify guys like, I think we talked about this at the combine. Like, you can identify that type of archetype of player. 6'2", 6'1", 310, first step explosiveness, strength. Those guys actually aren't going to go that high because they're going to look. You want the measurables. You want the Javon Kinlaw out there.
Right.
So guys will pass and fall that are kind of that DJ. That's why I won the 6th round. So I would be okay with looking to the draft. They went and they got the rotational guy, Son Ridgeway, who fits kind of what DJ role was. So
300-pounder, good first step, right?
Yeah, and he's strong and he's cheap.
Right.
And can play the rotational role. I forget who said it, but I think DJ Jones played 49% of the snaps last year on defense. Are you going to pay a guy $20 million guaranteed who's only going to play approximately 50% of your snaps on the D line when you use a heavy rotation? So although I love DJ and he was a great person to have, and watching his development throughout was fantastic, I understand it, and I understand them not matching. And same thing with Laken, same exact thought process, just offensive line. I would have loved to see one more year Raheem Mostert. I felt like I got cheated out of my starting captain Raheem, and that hurts because I mean, we saw it. The first 2 carries, 10-yarder. Like, I was like, oh, baby.
Here it is.
I was like, get ready. It's going to be a big year for Mostert. And then the knee injury happens. And, then we just went crazy at running back. Couldn't figure out who the guy was until Mitchell stood up. I would have loved to see him back on a reasonable 1-year deal. Again, he got a reasonable 1-year deal from the Dolphins. But I think the 49ers, it was just time for them to move on. But I wish we got one more year of Mitchell and Mostert.
Me too, especially since we are going to get to see Mostert in McDaniel's system, right? Like, if he stays healthy, we're about to witness a full season of Mostert. We're gonna see what we missed out on. And so the fear of missing out is going to become very real for me. That, I think, neck and neck for me with DJ Jones. I understand the argument that you have there of 50% of the snaps and how much you can impact the game. My stance to contrast that opinion would be one that if you can make a team one-dimensional, as DJ Jones and Eric Armstead were able to do playing inside, that has a domino effect, especially with our team, with the outside edge rushers that we have. Even though we couldn't get off the field on 3rd and long, once you've addressed the cornerback position, you would think then the edge rushers can feast. So making a team one-dimensional, to me, has a great impact. But I have to agree, if I'm going between the two, I have a little more fear of missing out with Mostert. And I think it's, the emotional connection to him as a human being, going through everything he did with the injuries and wanting him to succeed, and my fear of watching him have success in Miami. That, to me, is going to be tough to do. Well, let's close out on this one in addressing the remaining holes. Just in looking at free agents that are still out there, do you have your eye on any big names that the Niners might look to address some of those holes to fill in free agency?
Not really off the top of my head, to be honest, because I'm waiting for the Jimmy Garoppolo chip to fall. Because until he's moved, I can't see like getting my, trying to put my eggs or start evaluating someone that potentially is not even going to make it because we don't have the potential space to add them. Now, there are guys that are going to be out there. The 49ers still, I think, need a starting caliber safety to slot next to Ward. Nickel cornerback could be a potential situation. Situational edge rusher. Hopefully with Javon Kinlaw coming back, that's another guy you can plug into the defensive line on the interior. So maybe they feel okay there. But offensive line is, the big question. And wide receiver, I feel like you can address that in the draft along with running back. So I don't think there are a ton of glaring holes. But I also think it's hard to really kind of wrap your head around. Like Stephon Gilmore would be great. But he's going to require a contract. And where's the money going to come from? So it's just one of those situations where it's kind of, I feel like we are at the mercy of the Jimmy Garoppolo saga, unfortunately.
I agree. The two biggest ones that jump out to me as potentially addressing in free agency strike me as the safety and the nickel corner roles. I agree with you in viewing wide receiver, running back, tight end 2 as potentially draft day type of addressing the needs situation. And I want to close out on your thoughts on gains versus losses. But first, I'm going to bring in William Bonnet's question here. When this front office feels they need hold on, it got moved around. When this front office feels they need a piece, they go get it. Everybody does that when they need a piece. I think it's clear they are high on this roster. Sanders, Trent, Trey, etc. Hit or miss, they make the move when they need to. That's the interesting thing. It goes back to the philosophical view of their moves. I think that what they have shown us by the moves they've done is they feel they don't need to or don't want to at this time. And I don't think it's a case of being overconfident and saying, hey, we are the Super Bowl favorites. I think it is that caution coming in and being like, hey, we are a good team. We're going to compete this year. And we aren't completely sure of our identity yet, so let's be cautious in how we proceed. That, to me, is the message that I get.
Absolutely, and I agree. And I think what this team, I think, has been really good at is projecting out. Because, again, we get hyper-focused on the right now, and we also have to project out 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Where's the money coming from? They just kicked a ton of money down the line with Eric Armstead and George Kittle. So what's the cap going to look like next year? Again, we talked about Debo and Bosa needing to get paid. What does that look like? So it's just, I think they're doing everything they can at the moment. If I had to cherry pick, someone that I would really like to see, you put Tyrann Mathieu back there, Jimmy Ward. Holy crap. Like, you just get two extremely athletically gifted and instinctual safeties that can play everywhere. And they're very interchangeable in how they can play corner. They can play in the slot. They can play the deep half. They can do everything. If you can get a guy like that in there, then hell yeah, we're talking. But where's that money coming from? And, how does that happen? That would be a dream scenario, though.
It really would. Well, it hasn't happened yet. So let's sum up what has happened right now. I just want to get your closing opinion on it before we jump off here. In the gains and losses, right? The net positive or the net negative. We came in with some holes. You laid out what you viewed those holes to be. We had some gains. We brought in Charvarius Ward from Kansas City. We brought in Ray McLeod from Pittsburgh. We brought in Oren Burks from Green Bay. It's amazing that we brought in a special team stud from one of the only units that was worse than ours. We brought in Hassan Ridgeway from Philadelphia. We brought in George Odom from the Colts. But we lost Laken Tomlinson. We lost DJ Jones. We lost Raheem Mostert, Trenton Cannon, Trent Sherfield, Tom Compton, Contavious Street. And that doesn't take into account the guys that are still out there, Jaquaski Tart, K'Wan Williams. As it stands right now, how do you even out those gains and losses? Are the 49ers a better team right now than they were at the start of free agency?
Unfortunately, I would say they're not a better team. I think they took a step backwards, but I think part of it is part of this wait and see game
right
that's going on with Jimmy. So I think as it stands right now, of course, you lose two very high, their top end free agents in DJ and Laken. But the questions that are, for me, as you can tell, I'm very concerned with that offensive line.
As you should be.
The line isn't set, neither is the offense, right?
Right.
So it's a situation where I think they took a step backwards, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they keep moving forward rather than moving backwards.
Yes. I key in on that as the most important thing for fans to have patience, because the Jimmy Garoppolo domino needs to fall before we know the finality of their moves in free agency. And there are still some names out there that could make a difference. I tend to agree with the very succinct way that you laid that out right there, that we are looking at a team that took a moderate, mild step backward, and they need to rebuild in some areas where they did. But that's sort of the growing pains of paying your top-end talent. When you have homegrown talent and you got to pay them at the top of the league, you then have to make uncomfortable sacrifices to make room for that. The salary cap is real. It is just a set of rules that you have to operate within, and you can get very creative within that. But if you're not sure about something like your starting quarterback, you could hedge your bet a little bit. And again, that's my impression of what the Niners are doing. But I am open to new information. Every new signing is a new piece of information, and we change our opinions based on that new input. At least that's how I operate. I always love new additional info, and I love new signings. I love talking about new guys on the Niners.
Absolutely. I that's the best part. And I'm same boat with you. I don't like to be rigid in my thoughts. I feel like there's always new information that can be presented, and it should always be considered and evaluated into the thought process. So if you get some new info and you change your take or your thought process, I don't think that's an issue at all. I think that just shows that you're a smart person.
Yes, that is the scientific process at play, right? You put in that new information. Well, I hope that this show provided all of you watching with some new information. And I hope that we were able to change your minds in some way throughout this time that we spent together. This was a phenomenal 90 minutes. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, Brad. I want to say thank you for coming on the program. It has been my absolute pleasure.
Dude, it was a blast. Of course, we had a lot of fun at the Combine. I mean,
we did.
I got my Combine graphic behind me like we talked about.
Yes.
I know you got yours somewhere.
Dude, so I laid it out over a king-size bed, a California king, and it drapes over this. It is enormous, dude. So yes, for those that don't know, I also ended up with a graphic. I mentioned it on one of my shows. I don't know how it ended up in my bag. It just, as I got to the airport, there it was.
Like it just fell in there somehow.
It just did. It just did. But yes, I
don't know where it came from. I was like, I opened my bag. I was like, what the heck?
What was this? So mine's just too big to put anywhere, but we'll see. I'll get creative. It will happen somehow, some way. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. One last time, if you're still watching and you haven't hit the like button and subscribe, do it. If you haven't gone down into the description to find Brad's channel, do that now as you're leaving, because you got to follow this dude. He's the man. Brad, thank you for coming on, man. I know that you'll be going live on your channel. Any programs on the docket coming up?
I'll probably go live one more time today. It's been a marathon of lives this week, as I'm sure you know very, very well. It's been a hot week to talk football, so it's not going to stop anytime soon. I'll probably be going back on maybe in about an hour or so. So it's a little bit fluid, but once you of course hit that bell button, you'll know once we get something set up. So yeah, we'll definitely be going live later today. But what a wild ride it has been, and also the pleasure for you having me on to your channel again, Rob. And I'm glad we were able to keep doing this and really just had a blast with you at the Combine, man. So glad we.
Me too, my friend. Me too. One last super chat before we go. Miguel coming in. Niners keep buying from the dollar menu. Let's get a Big Mac. Enough with that dollar menu. LOL. Hey, what a way to end on. Let's go get that Big Mac.
What is Ward considered? If we had to pull all the menu items, what is Ward? Because
that's a quarter pounder with cheese if I've ever seen one.
I was going to say the same thing. Let's go, Rob.
Let's go. All right, man, Brad. As I said, man, just can't get enough of it. We'll make it happen again. Until next time, you all know the drill. Cheers, Niner faithful.